Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hokyoji Sunday Dharma Talk. I'm very pleased this morning to be introducing my longtime Dharma friend, Reverend Myo-On Susan Hagler, who we practice together with Katagiri-Roshi and have known each other for 40 years. Myo-On is a senior teacher at Clouds and Water Zen Center. She's in the Teacher-ryo, it's called, the teacher group. She was Dharma transmitted by Dokai, and she's had a chance to practice in many different sanghas, both in the Midwest and on the West Coast. And she's been a devoted friend and worker at Hokyoji, as you all know. So good morning, Myo-On.
Good morning, everybody. It's been a while since I've spoken to you all at Hokyoji, so this is a real treat. I wanted to start with doing a little bit of a dedication. This is something we do at Clouds and Water, and I think it's kind of nice. So, this talk is dedicated to all those who have come before us, those who have lived on and occupied the spaces where we now abide, both physically and psychically. This includes the indigenous people who lived in the place we now call Minnesota, which actually is an indigenous word that means clouds and water. Our biological ancestors and spiritual ancestors from India, China, Japan, and in my particular case, my paternal grandparents came from a place called Galicia, which is now not labeled as Galicia, but it is part of Western Ukraine and Poland. And so I feel a deep connection to what's going on there right now. And the United States, of course, and people right here at Hokyoji. It is with deep gratitude that I offer these words. Currently, I'm facilitating a study group at Clouds and Water that's concentrating, that we're using this book that's called Being Time. And it's a book by a priest named Shinshu Roberts. And she's done a beautiful job of helping us access the Dogen's fascicle on Uji, which means being time. And in her book, she actually calls upon a lot of Katagiri-Roshi's things to say in his book about being time, that's called Each Moment is the Universe. So we meet every 2 weeks on a Monday evening, and the last Monday evening we had one of our groups, and I was still contemplating, what am I going to talk about at Hokyoji on Sunday? And so we were speaking about an aspect of Uji, and I said, that's what I'll talk about. So I would like to begin with reading a couple of passages from Shinshu Roberts' book. This one is called No Passing Away. While both the three-headed, eight-armed demon and the 16-foot Buddha are present, the true expression of reality is more than either of these. Reality includes everything as the interpenetrating expression of codependent arising of all beings, which is called Buddha nature. Buddha nature is always fully present. Our ideas about 16-foot Buddhas and eight-armed demons come and go, but Buddha nature, just as it is always abiding. Hence, Dogen says, there is no passing away. So we are present for what is actually happening, going directly into the mountains. Everything that came before and everything that is happening now are included. As such, they cannot pass away. All these different activities are happening simultaneously, interpenetrating in this moment. This eternal now is impermanence. It is an independent moment expressed. It is interpenetrating time expressed. Your actions are not exempt from karmic repercussions because everything is still in a state of codependency. Yet the moment can be freely expressed, unobstructed by past demons or future Buddhas. So yesterday I had an interesting day. That it began with watching my 5-year-old granddaughter Simbri. And when she comes to our house, she likes to do a little bit of everything because things that we have in our house, she doesn't have in her house, which has been changing, that my daughter and her partner just bought a house that they moved into about a week ago. So things are quite a bit in transition. So Simbri appreciates coming here all the more. But one of the activities we've been doing is building with Lincoln logs. And perhaps some of you have had Lincoln logs in your childhood. And Duane and I found this old set of Lincoln logs in an estate sale somewhere. And for me particularly, that my memories of Lincoln logs have to do with my own grandparents, that they lived in New Jersey, and in their attic they had a space that they kind of had a play space for when their grandchildren came over. And I remember going up to their attic room, and they had a set of Lincoln logs, and I would be there building the Lincoln logs. And so when I saw this set of Lincoln logs, it was like, I have to get this for my grandchildren. But when I went up to the attic to play with the Lincoln logs at my grandparents' house, I was there by myself. But when Simbri and I play with Lincoln logs, and she really loves playing with the Lincoln logs and building with them, I'm right by her side, and we're building the Lincoln logs together, and we were creating a village together. And so it's kind of a different experience, but my experience of building Lincoln logs with my granddaughter is very much related to my grandparents and my grandparents' house. And so that moment of my own childhood is right with me in this moment, and there's no gap there. And when I'm building with Lincoln logs, doesn't matter that I'm 64 years old, I go back to just completely immersed in playing with Lincoln logs and creating a village with Simbri. And it's a lovely experience. My other experience yesterday, I called up my son Jacob, who lives in Japan. And Saturday night seems to be the best time for us to connect. And our Saturday night is his Sunday morning. And it's 14 hours ahead of time. So I have to wait till like 6 or 7 o'clock at night to call him. And it's like 9 or 10 o'clock on Sunday morning there for him. And so we were talking a bit, and I was wanting to talk to him because, as with everybody else, we haven't been able to travel for a while, and I'd like to see him and his children and his wife. And so we were talking about that. And then all of a sudden, there was this moment that I think many parents dread or don't look forward to. And Jacob said something to me like, I want you to explain yourself. And I said, okay. That there were difficulties in our family that I'm not going to go into when he was growing up. And it's weighed on, he's 35 years old, and it's weighed on him heavily throughout his life. And he had his ideas of what happened and what the meaning of my actions were and my husband's actions were, and my husband will have to explain himself. And so Jacob started asking me questions about particular things, and I just had to take a deep breath and say, okay, and explain myself and explain what my intentions were at that time. And it was not an easy thing to do. And I had to dig deep. And those moments of deep difficulty and pain were just right here in this moment with me now. There was no gap. So the pain I felt at that time was just readily available to me. But then he asked me an interesting question. He said, how does what happened inform your life now? Yeah, something like that. And I said, well, the difficulties that happened then helped me have empathy for people that might be living through the same circumstances and conditions. And so the moment last night was jarring, but those experiences that were direct so long ago are still the fertilizer for my life now, and to help me to live well. So our whole lives and the lives of our ancestors and all beings are really completely with us in this moment all the time. My grandparents' lives in Ukraine, in Galicia, that caused them to flee that place and come to the United States, still informs my life now. Shakyamuni Buddha's life and Dogen's life and their words and teachings still inform my life now, and they're not separate from this moment. I wanted to read another passage from Shinchu Roberts' book. This is under a section called Dilution is Included. Imagine a multidimensional 360-degree circle as the present moment. You enter into the circle from one of many degrees. This is what we can conventionally call your present moment or independent Dharma position. The question becomes, how will we exit that circle of possible responses? If we are being driven by our preconceived ideas, we have a very narrow exit band. If we can include everything, our needs and those of all beings present, then we have a much wider band in which to exit that moment. The possibilities will be defined by the needs of a given situation, not by our misconceptions about a situation. Hence, we are more likely to respond skillfully. When all possible 360 degrees of response are present, you are not being forced into a particular response based upon erroneous ideas or past actions. This is what it means to go directly into the mountains and see the total vista of your circumstances. This 360-degree circle really illustrates well what our lives are and how we endeavor to live them. That the phrase, not one, not two, came up for me when I was thinking about this. When we live our lives accounting for more than our small selves, for accounting for the total environment we live in, that something qualitatively changes. That when we take into account the 360 degrees of possibilities before we act upon a particular situation, to know what the skillful means are and the appropriate responses, that there's something that is just different from entering the circle by 1 degree and exiting the circle by that same 1 degree or 1 other degree somewhere without taking into account the 359 other degrees. That this is called, from my point of view, it's called inclusivity rather than being unilateral. That, of course, the particulars of our lives are always intersecting with the universal aspect of our lives. We are all in some way individual, but our task is really to live as not one, not two, without a duality, without a separation between what's universal and particular, or what's samsara and nirvana. That when I think it's Dogen, or I'm not sure who, is really emphasizing the way we will awaken in our lives is through our particular everyday experiences. And that's the only way to truly awaken, that our sitting on the cushion and doing zazen informs every other moment of our daily lives. And if we can live our daily lives with what we can call zazen mind, with kind of a mind of awareness and mindfulness, then our practice is not something separate. You know, oftentimes I hear people say, well, my practice isn't so good, or my practice is this and my practice is that. And obviously there's some formal practice we do, but the word practice for me, and I think is a good thing to look at, is our practice is just what our lives are. And there's nothing different, that when we're leaving the Zendo, or leaving Hokyoji, or leaving Clouds and Water, or some other practice place, what are we doing when we drive down the street? What are we doing when we go home? If it's different than what we're doing when we're in those formal practice places, it could be that there's not a lot of value in our formal practice. And, you know, Dokai, I've heard him say sometimes that when he's giving a Dharma talk, he's giving it to himself. And if somebody else gets something from it, that's pretty good. So I'm giving a pep talk to myself right now too, because I'm certainly not necessarily always living by what I'm saying right now, but I've got to keep coming back. So when we go forward in a so-called unilateral way, we might be inside the circle, and as I said, entering and exiting through one point without consulting the other points. And you know, this usually doesn't work so well. But when we're seemingly advocating for ourselves without taking other conditions and people and other beings into consideration, something, you know, can come back to bite us in the butt. That, you know, American society and Western society oftentimes has a very individual way of looking at our lives, and people are striving for themselves and profiting for themselves. And sometimes the key ingredient is what can I get versus what can and how can I benefit, rather than looking at, is what I'm doing beneficial to the wider society, the wider environment. And, you know, in Japan, the Japan culture is kind of the other side of the coin, where they are very much looking at the group and taking care of things in a group way and not concentrating on their individual selves. And that's not so good either. That there has to be a balance between our particular and the whole world, the whole of everything. And everything has to be included, even taking care of ourselves, because when we don't take care of ourselves, it affects other people. If we don't take care of our health, or we don't take care of our, let's say, our anger or the way we do things, ultimately it really affects all of those around us. And in some sense, the ripples affect the whole world, and it's very subtle, so we don't see it with our ordinary eyes. Seeking out the input and participation of other people, particularly those who are closest into us, is a pretty good idea. That a number of years ago, Tenshin Reb was leading a session at Clouds and Water Zen Center, I think maybe like somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago. And at the time, he was talking about the teacher-student relationship, but he also broadened it to say any relationship, intimate relationship that you're in. And when a person is in such a relationship, and you can in some ways say our whole lives about being in relationship to everything, but we kind of particularly have to notice those who are in our immediate lives. And there's kind of a difference of how we choose to act. I can go to Duane, my husband, and say, I'm going to go down to Hokyoji now for a week. And this is when I'm leaving, and this is when I'm coming back. Or I could go to Duane and say, I would like to go to Hokyoji for this week. What do you think? How does that work for you? So when I'm saying that this is something I would like to do, rather than, and making a request rather than making a statement, there's a whole different trajectory to the intimacy of our relationship. And he could say, well, that sounds pretty good, enjoy yourself. Or, well, Sally and Dan were working extra hours, and they were actually asking if we could watch Simbri for a few days in there. So that might not work out so well. And so a conversation is started rather than a statement or almost like a demand without there's some type of intimacy that's lost when our actions aren't inclusive of the others around us. So, and that's where the particular and the universal or broader beings in the world are included together. And there seems to be a way that's creating more intimacy rather than cutting it off. Another thing that happened with Reb, another teaching I received from Reb, when I was first ordained, I spoke with him about how to stay balanced, because there was all these new responsibilities and tasks I had, and it was a bit overwhelming to try to figure out how to proceed. And he said to me something like this. He said, keep checking in with the different constituencies you're involved with, whether it's home or work or, at that time, MZMC or anybody that I have regular interactions with, and check in to say, is there anything you need from me? Is there anything I can be doing? How can I help? And so to make sure that the people who are close in and organizations close in your life are getting their needs met by you. And sometimes one aspect or constituency will need more of your attention than another. And so it's not always that everybody or everything has to get all the same attention all at once, but sometimes one person needs something and sometimes somebody else needs something else. And so sooner or later it balances out. But to keep communicating and to keep making sure that neglect on your part, on anybody's part, is not happening. And if somebody says, hey, remember me, I need you, and I can say, oh, I'm so sorry, what can I do? And perhaps I can take care of something, or I can say, well, I'm in the middle of doing this with this person. May I help you in a couple days? And to just keep the line of communications open. As I said, that I learned some different things in terms of how to interact in an appropriate way from this session that Reb was leading. And one thing that was very impressive to me in terms of the right speech, in addition to making a request, to always think about making a request rather than a statement. And it's interesting for me that I've been doing this nonviolent communication class at Clouds and Water that Kyoku has been teaching, and it's over now, but that nonviolent communication has the same types of principles. But what I try to do when I'm approaching somebody, even if I know that they're probably going to say yes, instead of saying, well, I'm going to go into town now. And go take a bath at my house. Bye. Rather than, may I go to town now? I'm really tired and I would like to just go and relax in the bathtub at my house. And they might say, oh yes, please go. Take it easy and get some rest. Or they might say, well, all these people just left and we need to wash the sheets and fold them. So can you take a bath a little later? And I'd say, oh, okay. So it's inviting people to interact with each other and to be a participant with you in our lives. Let's see what time it is. 10:05. I just want to end with another quote from Shinshu Roberts from this book. And this section is called Standing in the Mountains. Standing on the mountain of the present moment, we realize that being time includes everything. It includes peace and war, calmness amid chaos. It includes realization in delusion, compassion in the midst of anger. All of these aspects of experience are present. Our actualized inclusive response is not obstructed by our self-centered views. This is realization. When we respond in an inclusive way, our realized self is in charge of our actions. This realized self does not need to banish delusion. In fact, our wisdom is a result of the problems created by delusion. It is like the grain of sand necessary to make a pearl. The oyster transforms the irritant of the sand into a beautiful object. But this could not happen without that particle of sand. Thank you. So I invite any questions or comments anybody might have.
May I speak?
Yes, please. Oh, yes. Well done.
When you were talking about, well, first off, I appreciate you sharing that intimacy, particularly your passage or section when you were talking about Jacob confronting you. At least I think that's what he was doing. It reminded me, I don't have children of my own, as you all are well aware, but I do have close Dharma friends through the years, and on many occasions, they would do that same kind of encounter, I believe. Maybe not exactly the same. Maybe it's different when your child confronts you that way. Maybe it's a little, but I'm not sure the feeling is different. So I'm speaking about when someone basically says, what was the point of, or what did you mean when you said that? Or what did you mean, what were you, explain to me why you did that, something like that. And they're not attacking you, they're just actually just confronting you. And that's a difficult place to be sometimes. And we can, it's not uncommon to, at least for me, to become defensive about protecting myself. So that's, thank you for sharing that piece. That's what it brought up for me. I'm talking about many, many years of Zen practice, all 50 of them. All the things that have happened with people confronting me about my behavior or my speech. And the second thing too that you said is when you were talking about practice, the word practice. And I was reminded, as most of you know, I'm very fond of the teachings of Zen Master Chow or Joshu. And he said on one occasion, I hate the word Buddha. And so if we examine that, that's because people were using, I'm going to interpret it as people using the word Buddha so much. And I've experienced, and from my own practice too, there we go, practice, that I was using the word practice a lot through a certain period of my life. And right now, I'm not fond of the word practice. It seems like it becomes a concept. You say, well, that's my practice, or my practice is this. It seems like, well, aren't you kind of making your practice into a conceptual thing? Wouldn't the practice just be, this is it? Not that you can even say that. So anyway, thank you for that comment as well. And I did a one question for you on not the last quote you read, but it was, I think the second one.
Okay.
In which you said, there's a couple words I missed. I couldn't, and they were the important ones. I think you started by saying delusion is, and the word I wrote down is encoded. Is it?
No, included.
Included. Okay, that makes more sense. Okay. And then can you reread the last sentence of that section? I missed a couple words.
Okay, so I'll read the last two.
I think it's, no, okay, whatever. But I don't know if
Okay.
it's one or two. But.
Okay. When all possible 360 degrees of response are present, you are not being forced into a particular response based upon erroneous ideas or past actions. This is what it means to go directly into the mountains and see the total vista of your circumstances.
Okay, and see the total what?
Vista. VISTA.
Okay. That's the word I missed. Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Tim?
So maybe there's something you can speak a little more on when it comes to asking or telling. Sometimes there's something you need to do that you have to do, and it's clear that you have to do. Like maybe they've called you into work 2 hours early. There isn't like, can I go into work 2 hours early? I mean, you're just going. At other times, there's something that you have to do, but it's more of an emotional, stressful feeling that you have to do. And there are different degrees of that. Some of that may arise out of wanting to control a situation, but some of those may arise out of needing to take care of yourself. And so in those situations, it feels difficult to ask if it's okay to do something because you have these other two possible needs. One might be, again, that it's a need to try and control something, maybe not even completely healthy, but it may also be a real need to take care of yourself, and you're really not feeling like asking for permission to take care of yourself. So if you could speak on that sort of a dilemma, because it comes up for me sometimes.
Of course, it's important for a person to take care of themselves. And what comes up for me is the Buddha's passage teachings on right speech. And so in his teachings on right speech, if what you need to do to take care of yourself involves another person and having a conversation with another person and interacting with them, that if I don't get this all right, please help me, anyone who can. So that you look at, is the thing you want to say true? Is what you want to say beneficial? Is what you want to say, is it the right time to interact with that person? That is that person able to receive what it is you want to say, what feedback you want to give them? And so if you go into a conversation and just don't give any warning that you're going to be jumping into this conversation, and that person has already had a difficult day or is really tired and is not able at that moment to receive your feedback, which they need to hear, that there's something a little bit wobbly about that. Like when I was talking to Jacob last night, he was saying, sometime I would like to have a conversation with you and have you explain yourself. And so I said to him, well, would you like to talk to me right now? And if I was tired and it wouldn't work, and in some way, perhaps I shouldn't have done this last night because I was on the phone, on the internet with him for 2 hours when I was possibly supposed to be working on my talk, but I decided to just, say, okay, please tell me what you want to know. And so, but on the other hand, I could have said to him, well, I'm giving a talk tomorrow and now is really not the best time. Can we make it another time? And so I think that there's skillful ways to do something like that if you're taking care of yourself directly affects a conversation you need to have with somebody. And if it's like you're called into work and you're sick, of course, it's somewhat a demand that you go to work, but obviously if you're ill, your responses are, I can't come, I've got COVID, or something, and so that there's always something happening. And so, and of course, then you need to take care of yourself. And so even when it seems like there's no choice, actually there is. A friend of mine, when I was leaving MZMC after a really difficult time there, said to me, you always have a choice. And when he said that to me, I had forgotten. I forgot that actually, no matter what, there is a choice. There is a choice to abide by, I need you to come to work. And if you decide I'm not going to work, then perhaps there's other consequences, like you're not going to have a job the next day, but you still have the choice. And so then you need to decide, is my need to not go to work, is that more important than having a job? So that's what I've got to say. So if you would like to respond to what I just said, please go for it.
No, that's good. I like there is always a choice, and the timing of communicating with another person. That's also good wisdom. I think sometimes for me, when it comes to taking care of myself, it's not always easy to tell the difference between when it is truly taking care of myself and when it is trying to exert energy to control things, when control is not necessarily healthy. But it can feel like if I take care of the situation and control it, I will be less stressed. But there can be an endless series of those, one after the other. But then sometimes it's clear that something does need taken care of because it's just the smart thing to do. It's just hard for me to distinguish sometimes between those two things. When it comes to taking care of myself or trying to control the ever-changing Dharma.
And I think control is dangerous. I kind of, not that I don't do it, I'm a human being, but I try to do it less than I used to. But I think it's important to look at when you're controlling something, are you doing it unilaterally or with the participation of whatever it is or whoever it is you're trying to control? Because it seems to me, through my life experience, which I've had plenty of foibles in, that controlling things usually kind of leaves out the controlled one. And it often doesn't work. And so to look at the spirit of that and what your intention is. Kat?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is kind of like solidarity with Tim, or it's more of a comment than a question, but I would like your guidance. I also really struggle with boundaries. And if I have high regard for someone, I really have trouble saying no. And so what I do is I fill myself up with other people's needs, doing things for other people. And because of my temperament being, really a genuine introvert, I can be social, but then I swing back on the other end of the spectrum, and I stay in solitude for a long time, and I kind of hide from all those other needs. Not so much from my children, because I always feel like I owe my children a debt. And I want to be an available parent, even though my children are older.
Yes.
But adults, as you say about your own children. But this is always a struggle in my life. And I have these times where, I'm tending to hang back in solitude, and I'm like, Kat, get over yourself. Go back out, but, I'm always having this like little ethical conversation with myself about what is the next right thing to do. And what do you do in the context of your talk when you are caught in that kind of, or maybe you're never caught in this kind of conundrum, but I am, what would be your advice to me?
Of course I'm caught in that conundrum. Who isn't, but many, many years ago, maybe like 35 or more years ago, I don't remember the particulars said, but I remember the title of her talk, that Teacher-ryo gave a talk on the practice of saying no. And because I think at that time at MZMC that people would just say yes to everything, and they said yes so much that they would burn out and they would disappear and perhaps come back someday or never come back. And so I think, and I'm from Long Island. I've been in Minnesota for 42 years, but my roots are from New York.
I get that, yeah.
And so, and it seems to me that oftentimes people in Minnesota, not everyone, but many people in the culture have a hard time saying no. But it seems to me that it is a good practice to take up, to learn to say no, to take care of your own needs and take care of yourself, as Tim was speaking about. And because when you're saying no to something, that my daughter might call and say, I need to do this thing, can you watch Simbri? And oftentimes I will say yes, but this times I will say, I just can't do it. I have this and this and this on my own plate today. Or I'm exhausted and I need to rest, and I'm sorry I can't take care of Simbri today. I mean, I would love to always say yes, but I can't always. And so when you're saying no to something, you're actually saying yes to yourself, because no and yes really are arising together. You can't have one without the other. And there's also this thing of perhaps somebody in a more authority position than you might say, would you be able to do something? And it's really hard to say no. Or, may I give you this feedback? And you're just not in a place to receive feedback. And perhaps, and this is something I learned from Reb, from when he was talking about this, and perhaps you have to say, well, right now isn't really a good time. Can we make an appointment to do this later? And so it is difficult in our Minnesota culture particularly, but in any culture, to say no. But to truly take care of yourself, you have, it seems most beneficial to learn to say no when you need to. And the fact that a person is saying, may I give you this feedback? And perhaps that person has this idea that, of course, you'll say yes, but they asked you a question and they made a request. And if you say no, perhaps they'll be startled, but they'll have to say, okay, then, but still, there's something about reclaiming your own life and empowering yourself to know that you have that choice. And it's something to practice with, from my point of view.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Myo-On, for your talk. We are needing to wrap up now. I'd like to make a few announcements. Next week's speaker on June 19th is Reverend Onryu Kennedy. So she gives good talks. You might want to tune in for that. Upcoming events, we have the Clouds and Water Zen Center coming July 11th at Hokyoji. We're looking forward to seeing them. The Family Community Weekend is August 5th through 7th. Let's see. Another way you can support Hokyoji is by connecting with our Facebook and Instagram pages. Please like us on social media and consider sharing our content with your friends who might be interested or maybe even visit Hokyoji. And we will end today with the 4 Bodhisattva vows.
Okay, John Kamen has something to say.
I see that. John?
Yeah, just a brief reminder to everybody that our annual meeting is scheduled for Saturday, the 25th of June, here in Minneapolis at the Washburn Community Library. And it's going to be around 1 o'clock when we start. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
And actually, I'm going to start at 12:30.
Okay. All right, Myo-On.
Well, if I might add that the staff and people at Hokyoji is getting a little thin, that Kosen left, and I've kind of scaled back my participation. And so it's important for people to, if possible, to come volunteer at Hokyoji to help with things, like to prepare for retreats. And there's been people, I think Kat and John have come to fold sheets and help clean up after a retreat. And so if there are people who have extra time, please come to Hokyoji to just help do some mundane stuff.
Okay, thank you. Now let's do the 4 vows.
Okay.
Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Good to see you all.
Yes, thank you. See you soon.